This morning's session is about the integration of the economy in great regions like Europe or Asia. Actually, I just want to convey this idea that no need to mention the integration of Asia. Even the integration within China has now encountered some problems in like what we can see in Europe. So this is a huge problem. Maybe for free trade zone within Asia, it is fine, I think. But maybe if we want to move too fast towards the monetary union, as you said, it is very risky. Maybe we need to wait for another maybe 100 years. I don't know. Okay, so the title of my talk is the Eurozonization. This is a word I create to talk about this issue of Chinese economy. So now, you know, today's world is now in a great issue in debt. Everywhere the debt over GDP ratio is very high, as well as in China. Just yesterday, the news released by the central government said that the debt over GDP ratio in China, just debt by the government, is around 40% of GDP. And at the local level, it is reported that the total debt of the local government debt is around 16 trillion. But most of the economists in China and also all over the world believe that maybe this figure could be underestimated. So this is a great issue. But the problem now in China is that even the ratio of debt over GDP ratio is actually still rising very fast if you look at the trend. This is a very risky future for China to face. And so what is the reason? Now I want to compare China with Europe, actually with Eurozone. So you can see from this figure that we need at least two conditions to see the debt crisis. The first one is market segmentation, because it is very important for the one currency region to have equalized per capita GDP across different regions. But in both in Europe and China, we both have very huge, serious interregional barriers for labor mobility. So this is why you can see that in Europe, the richest country, they have almost a high level per capita GDP, twice than that of poorer countries like Greece. And in China, we also have interregional obstacles for labor mobility. So this is also why the richest region, as in Shanghai, you can see that the per capita GDP is almost 4 times that of the poorest province like Guizhou. So within a region where we have huge productivity differences, but if there we have one currency, the question is how can we form the exchange rate? The exchange rate is pegged to the per capita GDP on average. That's the problem. So for the richest region, richest country, maybe it's undervalued, but for the poor region, it's overvalued. So this is also a problem in China. So maybe another solution for a poor region is to reduce the wage. But the question is, if you have large disparity in per capita GDP, if you reduce the wage in the poorer regions, you need to accept interregional income disparity. But politically speaking, this is not acceptable. So this is a dilemma for the one currency region, but with huge interregional income disparity, interregional per capita GDP gap. So what's the solution? With the constraint of productivity, the poor regions will borrow. So this is the share of the inland provinces' debt by the government in the total country's overall debt. So you can see that in the figure I show, you can see their share is now actually rising. I mean, the poor regions in China are borrowing more and more compared with the country's total. And okay, I skipped this thing. So look at this. So this is a comparison between different regions. Here I show two numbers. One is the debt over GDP ratio on the vertical axis, and the other one is the per capita GDP on the horizontal axis. So you can see that even in China, you can see poor regions, poorer provinces, they borrow more. If you use debt over GDP ratio as the indicator, not the total debt in number. So I call the western part of China as China's Greece, actually. So if you remove the 3 richest megacities from this figure, the negative correlation between per capita GDP and the debt over GDP ratio becomes even more significant. This is the recent trend. Okay, or you cannot see the names of the dots. Actually, they are also the provinces. You can still see that in the recent year, last year, the negative relationship still exists in China. So what is debt over GDP ratio? In China, we put many debt finance into economic construction, into those construction of the industrial parks and new towns in the western part of China, and of course also including the central part. So this is very similar to the input-output ratio because debt is the input, similar to input, and GDP is our output. So the rise in debt over GDP ratio means approximately it's an input-output ratio. It's a reflection of efficiency, right? So if you see that in the inland region, the debt over GDP ratio is now rising very fast, it means the input-output efficiency is doubtful, right? So this is a very important question. So why we have very poor efficiency in the inland regions? Because ever since the year 2003, the Chinese central government moved a huge amount of resources, including land use rights, including monetary subsidies and fiscal transfer to the inland regions to support their development. But the question is no efficiency, right? Now, let us look at this one. This is a figure to show the logic for the lagged regions, why they borrow. Okay, so here, you see, we need to consider their local expenditure here, right? They need to use their local expenditure to support their aging population because in China, the social security is locally financed, right? And they also have huge incentive to develop their economy locally, right? By building infrastructure. This is also their local expenditure. And also to provide public services to their population because there is no free mobility of labor in China. So still many people live in the lagged regions. Okay, so this is their expenditure. Now look at the fiscal income. You know, the most important part of the fiscal income is based on their economic growth. But the question is now the growth is slowing down. And another source is land finance because they sell land use rights. And this is also related to GDP growth. And for the inland regions, they don't have very strong efficiency and competitiveness because their per capita GDP is very low. And at the same time, they are within the one currency region. Don't forget that. Okay, if they are independent countries, they can devalue their currency, depreciate their currency. But as in Greece, they cannot. So they are constrained by their per capita GDP, and they are also constrained by the one currency region in China. If you consider China as a one currency region, just like Eurozone, right? So they need to spend money, but they don't have enough money. So they rely on fiscal transfer from the central government. The question is, if they have fiscal transfer from China's central government, do they borrow less or borrow more? Right? If you treat this like identity, maybe you will think that when they have more transfer from the central government, they will borrow less because they have money. But please consider another issue, which is now happening in Europe, moral hazard. The poorer regions, they may think that if you will give me money, I can rely on the transfer from the central government, then I will borrow more. So the logic is, if they can borrow more, they will borrow as much as they can, and then they spend all the finance they can get from the financial market to do something, right? To do something. Okay, so this is an empirical question. Do they borrow less or borrow more if they have money transfer from the central government? So this is the research question we do. We want to show that they do have moral hazard issue. By doing so, we ask a question, how do China's central-local government relationship will affect local government debt? And actually, we use econometric models to show how does fiscal transfer will affect the issue of UCIB, which is urban construction investment bonds, which is a very important part of China's local debt. And because of the limit of time, I just summarize my research findings for you to see. We do find that fiscal transfer and the issue of urban construction investment bonds are actually positively correlated to each other. This means special fiscal transfer per capita increases by 1 yuan will lead to the increase of the issue of UCIB by almost 0.3 yuan. So they are positively correlated to each other. And we also find that this positive relationship only exists in the lag regions, in the inland provinces, in the coastal area of China, just like France and Germany in Europe, they don't have this positive relationship. So this means what? The lag regions, they're constrained, they borrow, and they expect that the central government will pay for their debt if they cannot return. And finally, this is a moral health issue, which is a very serious problem in China. So in summary, even China as a country can give us some knowledge to consider whether we need to have a one currency region. If the conditions do not mature, maybe this is a disaster rather than a benefit. Thank you so much.